If your podcast is all about making a positive impact in the world and creating change, then this episode is definitely for you. Today, we have Katherine, who works specifically with nonprofits to create fundraising opportunities. And her podcast is absolute gold. We talked about strategies that she's used for her show to grow it, to get more visibility, to get clients or potential clients from it, as well as the direction that she's going to shake things up with her show in the future. This episode, there are so many strategic ways to monetize your podcast, as well as get it in front of new eyes. And that is really important, especially when you're trying to use your show to make a positive impact. So please join me in welcoming Katherine to the podcast. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alicia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello, Katherine. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. If you could start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and a bit about your show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I'm always excited to talk about my podcast as well, because it was a very interesting and very lengthy process. As anyone who has a podcast, I'm sure knows, it's not as easy as it appears. So I'm actually a fundraising consultant. I help nonprofits around the world really build up their fundraising strategies and platforms so that they can do more good in the world. Because as we all know, it takes money to do a lot of the stuff we do. But I am also a world traveler. So that's also been something that's been very interesting to work with nonprofits from everywhere in the world. And my specific expertise is in what I've been calling non-human philanthropy. So it's everything that has to do with animals, the environment, conservation, all that jazz. I do also help people. I don't hate people or anything. Don't worry. It's just that's the areas that I've worked in the most. So I work with a lot of animal shelters, conservation, and environmental education organizations.
And your show, is it geared towards the business that you do and the fundraising strategies and stuff like that? Or are you interviewing people who are in that space? What is that like when you were thinking, okay, how do I want to structure this podcast?
So my process actually started off with doing a survey with my target audience. So my target audience that I wanted to reach with the podcast was other nonprofit leaders and also maybe other nonprofit consultants, because I learned a lot from other consultants before launching my own consultancy. So I think we can always be in a constant learning, even if you're considered an expert. That doesn't mean you can stop learning now. So I actually have noticed that both consultants or people in social purpose-driven organizations or businesses are also listening to the podcast as much as nonprofits. So I started with a survey where I asked people, what kind of podcasts do you like listening to? Do you like interviews? Do you like solo episodes? How long do you like listening to podcasts for? How many do you listen to in a week, et cetera? So it got me to think about the structure of what my podcast should look for. And I even asked them what topics they'd like to be covered. That's how I started. And then that's how I launched it. So I was doing a lot of interviews, especially with the intention of talking about stories of interconnection between causes. That was the original driving theme of the podcast, because I noticed all nonprofits work in these bubbles of oh, we help animals. Oh, we help women. Oh, we help children, or we help children with cancer, or we do this. Everyone was kind of working in their own bubble and no one was talking to each other, or very few. There was this sense of competition between a lot of nonprofits. And what I wanted to show with these episodes with people was showing how, I'll give you an example. There's this one amazing organization that is technically, it's called Pause for Hope. And so they do foster care for animals, but they do foster care for animals from people in very specific situations, people that just got kicked out of their house, that are looking for housing. And as we all know, finding housing with pets is very challenging. So this is one of the main reasons why people abandon animals. But it's not the person's fault. Or what about people fleeing domestic abuse or that have addiction for alcoholism and they need to check themselves into rehab, but they can't do that because they have their pet and they're not allowed bringing him. So this organization helps these people get the help they need and get their life in order, but still knowing that they have their pets waiting for them when they're ready. That really helps the people as much as it helps the animals. So when I hear stories like this, it really shows the interconnection between these causes. And so that I wanted to really inspire people to start thinking about the collaborations they could make with other nonprofits to just let's help each other out. We have the same mission. It's just we're approaching it from different angles. So that was the number one of sharing those stories. But of course, as a fundraising consultant, one of my objectives is obviously to generate leads to help more clients and to get more clients. So I do integrate fundraising consulting and fundraising advice into most of these episodes where I ask like, okay, so what's your biggest fundraising challenge? And then we kind of dive into some free fundraising advice and support. So that's kind of how it started.
And have you found that that has led to, like, keeping those conversations going, or creating those connections has led to you getting leads from your business? And so I ask that because the show used to be called Listeners to Leads, and that was like the hyper focus
Mm,
of using your podcast to generate leads for your business. And I kind of wanted to expand it, but that's something that is always near and dear to my heart, is like, let's use our
sure.
podcast to make money, because what are we here for? And
Yeah.
we need to be able to do nice things, and we need money to do that.
Yes. That is the whole fundraising thing, right? Would I say that I've had listeners reach out and be like, hey, I listened to your podcast and it has confirmed a client right now? No. But some of the guests I've had have opened into really good connections that have then led to more connections. So it's often kind of a long-term game with podcasts. For me, I see it as building up my network, making connections with other people, but also the guests themselves become potential leads. And for me, it allows me to connect with people with an offer. So I was like, hey, I really love the work that you're doing at your nonprofit. Would you be interested? I'd love to feature you on my podcast. Can we have a conversation? So it made me able to reach out to potential clients with an offer that wasn't, hey, I want you to pay me to work with you. It was like, I would love to showcase your work. And obviously, that led me to having conversations with them about their fundraising, which then could lead to clients. I also find podcasts are a great way of building trust. And for anyone who works with nonprofits, they're not the most trusty batch of people, and they take a really long time to make decisions. I've started making these calculations around when someone books an exploration call with me and when they sign a contract, my average is 3 months. That's an
Wow.
average. Like they want to work with me, and it still takes 3 months before they sign a contract. And that doesn't include how long they were in
Right.
my network before. So how did they first get in? It could have been 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I don't have that because it's really hard to know. I don't have anyways, I know I could figure it out, but I haven't started tracking that yet. But I know that this podcast is about building up that long-term credibility with nonprofits. And also, and this is gonna be my, like, my little good hard feeling person. I've had people that I know will at this moment
Right.
cannot afford to hire me. I know not everyone can. So this is my way of saying, listen, I get it. You're not at the point where you can hire me now. Why don't you listen to my podcast, start getting aware? Maybe this will help you. And then eventually, and then I've gotten potential sponsorship opportunities from donation platforms and nonprofit focused companies that want to get visibility on my
Yeah.
platform.
Yeah. So let's talk about the sponsorships, because, like, there's so many different ways to monetize your podcast, and listeners to leads could be one, your guests to leads could be another. And it's honestly one of my favorite because it's probably the easiest one to track, but also to keep the conversation going and get that ask, that initial, like, connection. But sponsors is
Mhm.
one where I think that a lot of, especially when we have our own things that we're selling, we have to be really careful about what sponsors we're agreeing to, that it doesn't take away from our
Yep.
credibility or our products or our services. So what was that process like for you?
So I use my podcast not as a direct sponsor on my podcast. I use it kind of just like as one of the pieces of
Got
my
it.
arsenal of marketing. I find adding people like I'll have an episode with you where you'll be able to talk about yourself organically and we can talk about what are the advantage of, let's say, the specific tech or the platform that they are trying to promote. I find that has been a good way of leading in and just including the podcast as one of the many things I do. So I'm a speaker at conferences. I have a really good following on LinkedIn. I have a good newsletter, and I have a podcast episode that people can listen to. It's more of that adding it on to one of the other things. I haven't yet, I have content creation sponsors, but it's not
Mhm.
podcast specific. It's just everything. And so include the podcast of when I'm talking about, let's say, a donation platform, I'll mention my sponsor because I do love their product. And I do use it with my clients. So I will kind of very organically name drop them in my podcast, which for them is much more value than in a paid sponsorship, because people don't feel like, oh, this is because she's getting paid to do this. This is just me talking. So it's more like a subtle sponsorship. And that I think is a big future of sponsorship and content creation. People don't want to feel like they're being sold to, if that can make sense. Like, let's take TikTok and Instagram as an example. You know, all those girls with, I don't know, recently it's been with this weird cream that like cleans your pores. Like, that's just like taking over my social media. And they're always like, oh my God, it's amazing. Like, and they're like, buy it here. And I'm just like, as soon as that happens, I'm like, oh, they're getting paid or they're an affiliate, which is fine. And I'm not saying that it removes from the product, but it kind of does. It feels less real. Obviously, it's more real than a super fancy ad, but more and more people are kind of getting to the understanding where people are getting paid to do this. So from my podcast perspective, to bring it back, I find it's easier to say, listen, like, you will be the donation platform that I recommend organically when I'm talking about different fundraising campaigns or when I'm writing articles. You'll be sprinkled in very organically. So it doesn't feel like I'm like saying, hi, well, do you want to learn about donor box? Like, well, these are the 10 things that, like, it just, it sounds forced, right? So that's how I've been using the podcast as just like an additional plus to being a sponsor of my content strategy
Yeah, and I
overall.
love that, and I agree. I think that we are seeing a shift. I think sponsorship is still available, like, people are still trying to sponsor podcasts.
Yes.
Podcasting is still on the uptick for the money going into it and the
Mhm.
industry as a whole and the sponsorship dollars. One, listeners are skipping a lot of the ads.
Yeah.
They're sick of it. And so, how can we as hosts talk about products that we actually know and like and trust, but also be promoting them in a really natural way? And I think that we do have to be integrating it in all the different places. Like, even, all right, you put a blog post up for your podcast episode. On the sidebar, here are some of my favorite products, or here are products I'm using. There you go. Easy way for it to just show up there. You still have that kind of checkbox for the sponsor of like, it is there, people can see it. And I think that makes it a lot easier for the sponsors to say yes to, because it's not just based on the number of downloads that the podcast is getting. And then you can ask for more money with that sponsor as well, because it's more of a collective. All right, I'm all of these audiences together, not just 100 downloads for the podcast or
Mhm.
whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I've had a couple conversations with other podcast people where they're saying, never pitch your podcast based on the number of
Right.
downloads, because that's not the biggest value, right? Like, of course, you're getting into someone's ears. Like, I listen to podcasts and I've clicked on lead magnets from people's podcasts where I'm like, oh, this was really beneficial. Like, she's like, well, if you want to hear my top 10, like, entry leads or whatever it is, like, go download my guide. Like, those things I find work much better than sponsors, where it's like, if you do a collaboration where you're building up some form of lead magnet where people can actually sign up for something free and get access to an exclusive something, people are much more likely to be interested because they're getting something than just an ad that annoys them when they're in the middle of listening to a
Yeah.
podcast. So I think it's about being smart about it. And also, if you're a podcast host, just as a podcast host, then of course, I'm guessing your listenership is probably going to be much bigger. I did this podcast as a semi passion project, also lead generating. But for me, it's just part of my much bigger credibility as a fundraising expert through my other marketing channels that makes it much more advantageous for my sponsors. Because I'm making noise across many platforms, I'm also reaching many different people in
Right.
different ways. Not everyone listens to podcasts, but the people I am reaching them as well as on LinkedIn, as well as on Instagram, as well as on email lists and my website. So it's about like the diversification, if I could say, visibility. I think it'd be really advantageous if you have a
Yeah,
podcast.
and I agree. I think that so often we think, oh, I have to create all this new content across 15 different places. And you could just have, all right, the blog is my starting point, and then I create a podcast episode on that, and I create an email newsletter on that. And there I've got a LinkedIn article, right? Social posts, everything. Like, you can just that one piece, all right, and then push it out to all the different things. When you said having that free product, it made me think of like even bringing it to super practical tips of like, okay, maybe you have a sponsor, you have affiliates that you really like that you're trying to kind of slide in there. Say, all right, in the case of this audience, you're a podcast host. Here are my top 5 products that I love as a podcast host. and then have affiliates, right? In the little downloadable, right?
Et
Super
voilà.
easy. Just have the note, hey, I do get a little kickback. They does not cost extra for you, right? A little note in there that you have to have.
And ideally, what would be great is if they actually get a benefit from signing up
Right.
for your link. So, for example, I use Flowdesk drop, but just as an example, I use them like personally. That's what I use my emails for. And every person that signs up, I get $19. Okay, I'm not becoming a millionaire, but you get 50% off your first year. That's a $220 saving. That's an
Right.
advantage for the person to use your link. So those kinds of affiliate things I think are really beneficial when the person not only doesn't get charged more, but actually gets a
Mhm.
discount. That's I think something that can be a really great way. And obviously people love discounts. People love feeling like they're getting a deal. So I think from an affiliate perspective, I really like those because it's so much easier to sell. Like, hey, by the way, if you want to get 50% off your first year, like I have a code, click it there, you get 50% off. Like I get 19 bucks, we're both happy. Like it's
Yep.
a win-win. So I think those kinds of partnerships are something that I would really like to move forward with in the future, where by partnering with me and by me giving them visibility, the audience is much more likely to convert if there's an advantage for them to be using my link and not just being like Flowdesk on Google. You know what I mean? And then you can't track it. You can't track like how useful was this. There's no way that we're going to be able to know if this was useful or not. So having that push, it can be really helpful also from an evaluation.
Yeah, I have a client that they're in the menopause space. And so there's a product that, like a cream that they really like to use. And they're like, all right, this is how it's benefited me. These are the ways it's helped me. Here's 10% off your first order, right? Use this, my special code. And then she gets a kickback. So simple things, right? Where it's like, this is helpful for the audience and they get a percentage off. Win win. Now, you did mention that you are using your podcast as a core piece of your thought leadership kind of strategy. I'm curious if you have used your podcast as a way to say, hey, here are some examples of me talking or me presenting as a way to pitch yourself to be a speaker at events.
Yep, I have. And also just from a very personal perspective, like being on many podcasts and having my podcast has made me
Yeah.
much more fluent when I speak. I remember when my husband was first editing my episodes, I'd be like, yeah, and so many times. But having a podcast really allows you to develop your flow. So just from a personal development perspective, it has been great to just train myself to speak, which has made me much more attractive, if I could say, as a speaker at conferences. But have I used it? I have included it as like examples because a lot of times, like I spoke at these conferences, great, but they're not
Right.
recorded. So even if I spoke, like I might have been a really shit. You don't know. So like I've been to conferences where I'm like, wow, this person is not a good speaker. Like their content is good, but they're not a good speaker. So I like including a podcast so that people can hear me speak, they can get an idea. I sometimes put also my speaking on other podcasts because I don't have as much like control over the editing process. I feel like it gives them kind of some additional proof, especially when it's podcasts that have a huge listenership. So that's something that I find that's been really helpful. And I'll add on to something else of how I use my podcast at a specific conference as a
Ooh.
lead magnet. So how I actually use the podcast. It was when I did my launch. And for anyone who's thinking of launching a podcast, it was inspired by Dana Snyder. She is an amazing podcast host. I absolutely love her. It's Missions to Movements for anyone in the nonprofit space. She's like a marketing queen for nonprofits. So highly recommend. I'm not an affiliate of her. I just really like her. She was giving the breakdown of the roadmap of how she launched her podcast with a contest. And I did the exact same thing where I was speaking at an animal welfare conference in Montreal. So my exact target audience of people who love animals and working in the nonprofit space. So I built a contest where people can enter a contest to win free consulting hours. There was a free training, there was a free, I think, 3 or 4 hour session with me. And there was also a third prize was, I think, a donation. And I got sponsored by Lush. They gave a whole bunch of products that like vegan, good body products that I could ship to them. Never again am I going to ship products from Mexico. They don't arrive
Oh,
and it's
no.
super expensive. But anyway, the contest, so I used that as my lead magnet, both on my socials, but as well at the conference. So I launched 4 episodes that were animal related and environmental related. And I said, okay, to participate in the contest, obviously you sign up. So I got their emails, lead. Number 2, they got extra entries for following my podcast on Spotify, just following it on Apple Podcasts, for listening to one of the episodes. And obviously, the contest manager I was using, like it does the links. Does it actually track if they do it? No. But people don't know that, right? So they generally will do it. And I've got like, I don't even know how many followers and how many listens. And what did that do? My podcast in the first week of it launching got to the number 2 nonprofit podcast in Canada spot that I can now claim that I did get. So even if it was just for that week, that initial visibility built up my initial follower base. Because even if what are they going to go unfollow the podcast as soon as the contest is over? No. So they get the notifications now whenever I drop a new episode. So it built up a base of listeners from the get go. I use it as a multi-pronged thing of then I built up new clients through this giveaway. So that was a really cool way that I used the podcast as a visibility tool, but also as a lead magnet. That was really beneficial for my company.
Yes. And I'm thinking even for people who already have a podcast and are like, oh man, I missed it. No, like you hit 100 episodes, do a giveaway. You hit 200 episodes, do a giveaway. You're in new season, new giveaway. Like there's so many ways that we could use this and just keep repurposing that strategy as a way to kind of give that extra boost to our show. And if you already have 100 episodes, you could reach out to all your past guests and say, hey, I'm doing this incredible giveaway. Would you like to be an affiliate? Here you go, right? Like there's so many different ways that you can do this to make it bigger, better,
Yeah.
even if you're not at the beginning. So yeah, I love that strategy. It's so good.
It was really fun. Like I had a really great time. And it kind of gave me a reason to reach out to people.
Right.
Obviously, I harassed my friends and family. That was fun. Professional harasser right here. But it worked. It worked so well. And I still get messages sometimes from people that are like, oh, I just listened to your podcast. Thank you so much for sharing all your information. Like that's what kind of keeps me going. And I know that those initial pushes of people listening, well, downloading, like I have 65-star reviews on Spotify, like because I ask for them
Right.
and because I give something to, like, incentivize people to support me. And people do. People want to help other people. I do believe that, like that people like helping and they like feeling like they're, but when you have a mutual exchange thing, it's just even better.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a great strategy. And also, I like what you said about you don't have to be starting. Maybe if you're you're trying something new, like maybe you're trying a new type of episode, which I'm
Right.
actually going to be doing in 2026.
Cool.
Yeah, we can talk about that
Yeah.
as well. Where you're allowed to have your podcast evolve. Like it doesn't have to be the same thing forever. Like maybe you've either tapped out the content or you realize that people really like a specific direction you've been taking. And so you're allowed. And then that's a great opportunity to do a new contest or giveaway or something fun. Like I love branded stuff, but like when you can do it subtly, like
Mhm.
stickers that are subtly branded and then they'll have it on their phone or on their computer, then you get that daily visibility for that they'll think about you all the time.
Yes, for sure. I even think I'm an avid reader. For people who can see my screen, y'all know my
All the
bookcases
books.
are quite extensive. I have a whole nother black one on the other side
Oh
as
my
well
God.
that you can't see at the moment. When I'm full screen, you can see both. But on the back of my Kindle, I have a clear case. So for people who can or cannot see, I have a clear case. And 3 of the stickers that are on here, I specifically know the book and the author that they are tied to. And like one is like a
They're
hockey dude.
subtle,
Yeah, one is like a Olympus and then another one's like a little lizard dude. And like they're just characters from the stuff or like
but
pictures, but my brain. Yep.
you'll so I'll show you my laptop that actually broke on my trip, but like my laptop is absolutely covered. Oh, I don't know if it's gonna be blurry, but you see my little this one says I love animals
Aw.
just because.
Oh yeah.
So the name of my podcast is Just Because, the Just Because podcast. And my consulting firm is called the Just Because Consulting. I made a sticker that is a play on words of that, but also is cute and it's engaging. And everyone was like sticking it on their phone.
Yes.
That's prime advert space right there. I can be on your phone. How many times we check our phone every day?
Yep.
How many times are they thinking about me? Huh?
Yep.
So if you do a fun branding, that can be a really fun way of also just boosting your visibility. But then we digress. So much marketing we can
I
talk
know,
about.
right? Okay, so you're switching things up next year. I'd love to hear it. I've over the course of my many years in podcasting have done different variations and different types of shows and I did a whole year long where it was solo episodes, 10 minutes or less, answering podcasting questions, different podcasts that I drop in every other week and start like now this podcast is twice a week. So me on Tuesdays, guest on Thursdays, and then dropping in those bonus episodes that I've already recorded and like already have 54 of them has been really helpful because then I'm like, all right, two new solos. I can still show up, be the expert, but also have really juicy, delicious conversations with other podcasters and not feel like, oh man, you are going live in December and it's August. Like, I don't have to do that because I have the
Yeah.
guest every week. So, what are you shifting and adjusting and why?
So it's kind of similar to yours of I've been doing guests for a long time, but I have noticed that my solo episodes do really well.
Yeah.
People and they're shorter because like we're having a real conversation here. So of course we end up doing like all these weird like hoop de loops around the subject. But when I'm doing a solo, I just go straight to the point, and I tend to be much more practical of like step 1, step 2, step 3, step
Yeah.
4, and it's more condensed. And I found those do really, really well. And also, we have to be honest here. Like our goal, or at least my goal, is also to get clients. Like it's not that I don't show up as the expert, but they kind of get more of the floor, which is normal.
Yep.
So I find I've been starting to switch to or trying to do more solo episodes so I can really boost up that particular space. So I'm doing more solos, and the guests I'm going to be doing live coaching calls.
Ooh.
So that way I still show up as an expert. I still have guests, but I'm like not the focus, but I'm giving that concrete advice in a real setting. So it also, number one, brings new leads because once they have a free coaching call with me, they're like, ooh, this is
Yep.
awesome. I want more of this. Number two, I still show up as an expert. So people are still listening, being like, I want her to do that for me. And number three, it's also, I find it so much easier to have conversations with people than to just sit in front of a screen and talk to myself.
Right.
So I like having guests, but this kind of combines the three. So that's where I did a test with this girl. Her like persona is the trashy lady. And she was doing a fundraising campaign. She just launched it on her own. She picks up trash in her local neighborhood 3 times a week to fundraise for her local animal shelter. So it was like a super interesting
Yeah.
fundraising campaign. I gave her a whole bunch of advice, and she like tripled her fundraising since then. She was on television, she got interviews, and she said, you can very easily say that you inspired me to push forward. So I saw the direct impact of the calls as well. So yeah, so that's where I'm going into for the next season / year / I don't know what's going to be called.
Oh, I love it. And I like even thinking about like I have some clients where they'll do live coaching and then like 20 episodes later they'll have the person back and they're like, "Hey, so we had this, go check out that
Oh,
episode."
that's so
Or we might
nice.
drop it. Sometimes we'll drop it as like a bonus episode that same week as like a
Mm.
hey replay and then have the new one go live where they're like, this is where we are. Here's how she was able to take that, like maybe it's like productivity and like getting your kids' lives in order, right? Like, here's how we were able to do that. And here are the things that worked. Here are the struggles that we kind of came up against. And then here's how I talked them through it, right? So, like, oh, yes, I love
Oh,
it.
that's so great. I love it too. That's a great idea of doing the before and afters of like what happened. I would probably at the end of her Carolina, the trashy lady, at the end of her campaign, like I'd love to kind of have a retake of like what worked for her, what didn't work, what did she find was helpful. I think people love like I'm obsessed with before and after
Yes.
stuff. And I think the people when like sometimes we listen to advice and we're like, that sounds great, but did it actually work?
Right.
Is always the question I think at the back of everyone's minds. And so having that before where they're like expressing authentic difficulties, and then after you get to see, well, we actually managed to get 100 new monthly donors within 2 months.
Right.
And that's great social proof. And I think that's really important when we're having these calls. Like, yes, she was on the call live going like, this is so helpful. I'm taking so many notes. Like, I can't wait to implement it. But then we don't see the after. So that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I think I might steal it.
please do. And I'm even thinking like if the turnaround for because fundraising it's compressed, right? It's not like yes, you might have ongoing, but okay, we're doing a 2-month really push. And so you could save that episode that you record and then have them almost do like a call in of like, oh my goodness, voice memo, here's what happened. And then have that like play at the end and like, hoorah.
Oh my
Like,
God,
yes.
that's so smart. That would be great. Those are some great ideas. Now I have to rethink my strategy again. But no, that's so great. And I think people can really use your podcast as however the hell you want,
Yeah.
right? There's no rules other than like have good audio.
Katherine, one, I'm so excited to see the direction that you take your show. And thank you so much for being on and sharing all of your experiences and the things that have worked and not worked for your own podcast. If people are like, I want to listen to this show because it's clearly something that I'm passionate about. Like I told you before we hit record, I know quite a few people in the nonprofit space.
Mhm.
And so if they're listening, they're like, yes, please, fundraising tips, please. Thank you. My clients need this. Where can they find you, get to know you, hang out with you?
Well, my podcast, very easy. The Just Because podcast, you can find me on all listening platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever you want. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. I love getting conversation starters. So please don't hesitate to connect with me. On LinkedIn, I'm Katherine Lacefield. So you can just easily find me there. And if not, if you want to look at what my consulting firm can do, it's justbecause.consulting is the website. So anywhere, I'm super open. You can always send me a message like, hey, my client has this issue. Like, what do you think? And we can talk it through and see if I'm the right person to move forward with you. If not, just listen to the podcast and you'll get some free advice too.
Yes. And we'll make sure that we have links for all of that in the show notes and the YouTube description for anyone going about doing other things. We've got you. Grab those links in the show notes. Katherine, again, thank you so much. This was a blast.
It was too many ideas now. It's all your fault.
You're welcome.